If you are over 35, you remember two realities, not 2 decades, two completely different worlds. One disappeared forever, and you watched it happen while your brain was still forming. You remember silence, real silence, no notifications, no glowing screen, no algorithm filling every empty moment for you. You remember boredom that lasted entire afternoons, and somehow your brain became stronger because of it. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin calls this attentional conditioning. Your environment physically shapes how your brain filters reality, and your generation grew up inside two incompatible environments before adulthood even finished loading. That changes people permanently. TIM has seen the evidence, and once you recognize it, you cannot unsee it. But the science of what that did to your specific brain is far deeper than anyone told you. You were built by boredom. That sounds like an insult. It is not. Before the internet arrived, boredom was not a problem. It was a neurological process. Dr. Sandy Mann at the University of Central Lancashire found that boredom forces the brain into a specific productive mode. Your default mode network activates. You connect unrelated memories. You generate scenarios. You become creative without trying. That happened every time you stared at a ceiling, every time you sat in a car with nothing but a window, every time you waited with no phone in your hand. Your brain was not idle. Your brain was training. Dr. Patricia Greenfield at UCLA documented that analog environments trained delayed gratification as a daily neurological exercise. You did not choose patience. You were forced to practice it so often, it became architecture. Your brain literally formed around the experience of waiting, around the experience of effort. That is not a personality trait. That is neural infrastructure. And then one day that infrastructure met something it had never encountered. You remember the exact moment the internet entered your life. A dial-up modem, a screeching sound, a blinking cursor, and suddenly the world had a door it never had before. Neuroscientist Dr. Jay Geed at the National Institute of Mental Health confirmed that the prefrontal cortex continues developing until the mid-20s. You were still building when the internet arrived. This is the critical distinction. Older generations encountered the internet after their identity was formed. They adapted from the outside. But you were different. You were still building your first language when the second one arrived. The internet did not change you. It became part of you. And that partial integration created something that younger generations will never fully understand, a psychological tension that lives inside you every day. You are fluent in both worlds. You know what it felt like to leave the house with no way to be contacted. No one could find you unless you let them. That felt like freedom. You also know what it feels like to be permanently connected, to feel the phantom vibration of a phone that is not buzzing. You carry both operating systems in the same brain. Dr. Larry Rosen at Cal State calls this techno-brain burnout. But for your generation, it is more specific. It is the exhaustion of switching between two completely different ways of being human. But the digital transition was not the only earthquake your generation survived. You also watched the death of permanence. The stores vanished. The music formats vanished. The jobs vanished. The future you were promised vanished too, especially after 2008. Economists Ulrike Malmendier and Stefan Nagel studied recession psychology extensively. Their research found that early economic trauma alters risk perception permanently, not temporarily, permanently. People entering adulthood during economic collapse become structurally more cautious. Your generation lived this exactly. You graduated into instability. You watched careers collapse overnight. You watched debt become normal, and your nervous system adapted around uncertainty. That is why many people your age feel exhausted, even when life appears stable. Your brain stopped assuming stability a long time ago. It learned survival instead. And survival thinking never fully powers down. But underneath the exhaustion, something else was being built. Something that no one in your generation has been told they carry. You remember collective culture. Everyone watched the same shows. Everyone heard the same songs. Everyone disappeared together when the television ended. Now culture fragments endlessly. Algorithms isolate attention. Sociologist Sherry Turkle found that digital communication creates the illusion of companionship without the demands of intimacy. You felt that shift happen gradually. Friendships changed, moments changed, even memory changed. Photos stopped becoming rare. Everything became documented constantly. And somewhere during that transition, people stopped fully inhabiting experiences. Your generation remembers both states. That creates nostalgia far deeper than younger people understand. You are not nostalgic for objects alone. You are nostalgic for a psychological atmosphere, for slower attention, for uninterrupted conversations, for the feeling that life was happening instead of being uploaded continuously. But here is what that nostalgia actually is at the neurological level. Dr. Konstantin Sedakidis at the University of Southampton found that nostalgia is not just an emotion, it is a neurological anchor, a system the brain uses to preserve identity when external conditions shift rapidly. Your nostalgia is not weakness, it is your brain protecting the version of you that was built before the world changed. And that protection comes with something most people in your generation do not realize they have. You can read a room, not a chat room, an actual room with actual humans. You grew up depending on faces for information. Before you could search how someone felt, you had to look at them and figure it out. That built something in you. Social neuroscientist Dr. Matthew Lieberman at UCLA showed that face-to-face social cognition activates regions that screen-based interaction does not engage at the same depth. You exercise those regions daily for 2 full decades of your life. You can hold a conversation without reaching for your phone. You can sit in silence with someone without filling it. Psychologists call what your generation built stress inoculation. Repeated exposure to instability increases resilience under future uncertainty. You survived analog collapse. You survived internet expansion. You survived economic instability. Your nervous system became adaptive by force, and that adaptability will matter more than ever because the world is not slowing down. Artificial intelligence will accelerate this further. And strangely, the people most prepared for constant transformation may be the generation that already survived it once before. You are not forgotten. You are transitional. You are the bridge generation, the last people who remember life before the internet consumed every empty space, and the first people forced to build adulthood inside permanent digital reality. That is not a small thing. That is a historically rare experience. Most generations inherit a stable world. They adapt to it slowly. They build identity inside it. Your generation did not get that. You inherited one world, then watched it get replaced before you finished becoming who you were going to be. And you kept going anyway. That leaves real marks on the brain, but it also created strengths most people will never notice in you because they cannot see what you were built from. They only see who you are now. They see the patience and do not know what trained it. They see the adaptability and do not know what forced it. They see the calm you carry during chaos and do not know it was earned. Patience, adaptability, independence, tolerance for uncertainty, psychological endurance. You did not develop these by reading about them. You developed them by living through the longest transition in human communication history, and you were still becoming when all of it happened. We are the last people who remember what silence felt like before the internet filled every empty moment. That memory is not nostalgia. That memory is a document, a living record of what human attention was before it became something to harvest. Hold on to it, not as grief, as knowledge, because the world is accelerating again, and the people who know what it felt like to exist without all of this are the only ones who can remember what is worth protecting. Few generations have done that, and if this felt uncomfortably accurate, your brain already knows why. If this video put words to something you have felt for years but never fully named, then the next video will go even deeper. Tim covers the psychology that does not make headlines but shapes everything. Subscribe if that is what you are here for.